Alright, so in this tutorial, I'm going to show how to test your skeleton joint chain and also how it influences the mesh. So basically to see if you like the range of motion, right? Because right now it's hard to visualize what to expect. So I'm in the front view right now, and I'm going to crack open the entire joint chain for the K. So I hover over here and you will see a little plus sign. I'm going to hold shift, I'm going to click on this plus sign. That will expand everything. Right? Then I'm going to just select, for example, from the bottom up, like that, or from the top to the bottom. What you do not want to do is to try to select it like this. Trying to do a marquee box selection. If you do that, it looks like everything is selected, but that's not the case, because if you look in the outliner, only one thing is selected, the root joint, which is that one singular base joint. So again, just like here, carefully select it. I repeat, carefully select it and then hold shift and select it like that. If you do not carefully select it, you could inadvertently, like, for example, if you're like trying to, select it, I can't mimic the situation, right? But it will happen where if you just like rough it and you grab it, you can and you will end up dumping one of the joints into something else, into another joint. It does happen. So select it carefully, select one end, shift, hold shift and left click, select everything. Basically shift select, right? But do it carefully. Something will break if you just try to do it really quick and not pay attention. So I select all of it. I'm going to hold control or shift, whichever, and also select the mesh. Okay, so like I said, you select all the joints first carefully, then you also select the mesh. Now I'm going to go to skin, bind skin, option box. Remember, I'm in the rigging menu. Like in the PDF guide states that I made, this is the little recipe you want. Just follow this, right, and you're good. Okay, just exactly this. If you rush it, you will miss something, and that's your fault. Hit apply and close. It's gonna calculate. If you look down here, do not do anything, leave it alone. Right, it's computing. Let it process. I'm gonna pause the video for a second. Alright, so it just stopped. Just finished. You will notice now that the chains, they look different. They have nice little color gradation to them, right? See? This means that they've been, the mesh has been bound to the joints. That's what it means. Right? If I were to select the mesh, right? I did not select it through here because it's set to reference, right? By the way, also have your mesh in one layer, have your joints in another layer. Anyhow, let's say I make it not referenced for the mesh. If I select it, you will now notice everything's grayed out. And you will notice that it says here, skin cluster 1. Do not mess with anything in here. This basically tells us that you know, the skinning, the binding was done. Again, that was under skin, bind skin, right? With the specific settings. So this is how you know. This is what that is. And like I said, it's locked out. So you can't mess with it by accident. If you try to move it, you can't move it, right? So that's what that means. So like I showed in class, if you try to rotate it, which you can, you'll notice that it looks absolutely horrific, right? And you probably think, you know, all that work for what? To make this? Usually this will lead into painting weights, right? I talked about it in class. It's where there is a specific set of tools and strategies where the bones and the parts of the geometry mesh, right? And how, okay, so you see the colorations, right? So the mesh, the vertices, specific sections of the vertices, chunks of it, are influenced by specific set of bones. That's how these deformations happen. And then that's where you have to go in and do very specific painting weights to redistribute certain parts of the vertices, right? So that this doesn't happen. All this nasty looking, you know, abnormalities in the vertices, right? So it's very tedious. But like I said before, and I told you guys that there's a little extra little goodie that you can apply that will fix a lot of this, right? Which is called the delta mush. So delta mush, you do this, the delta mush after the fact, after you bind the skin. So you select the mesh, just the mesh, right? Nothing more. And I could just even leave it like this to show what it does, what little magical properties that does. Deform, delta mush, option box. All you do is set this to 40. Smoothing iteration, set it to 40. So all you do, hit apply, and you'll see what happens. Ta-da! So that alone negates at least a good, I don't know, especially when you're learning, good dozen hours. Probably more like 15 hours when you're learning. Unless you're a genius, then who knows. So now it works, and now you can test it. But I'm going to set the mesh to reference, so I don't grab the mesh and move it. I'm going to turn on X-ray joints, right here, X-ray joints. That is also in the PDF, as well as the Learning Objectives Word document. I can grab this, I'm going to rotate it, grab that, I can rotate it, grab that, rotate it, grab that, rotate it. Right? If I want to reset the joints, right? So let's say I'm gonna just do this. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that. Right? I'm gonna grab this. I'm gonna do that. Grab that, and I'm gonna do that. Do that. The way you reset everything, right? After testing it, let's say I grab that. I can do this, this. You want to reset. How do you reset that properly? Do you do it individually, or is there a faster way? Well, what you do is you select everything, and I said again, carefully select everything. Select the bottom, shift select to the top, holding shift, and you click. Then under rotate, you press 0. Now reset everything. You notice that I did not move things. I did not move things. Do not move things, the joints. You can move the joints, but there is a specific reasoning why and how to reset it, right? But anyhow, that's how you bind the skin, and you do the delta mush to test the articulation, right, and the range of motion. Like for example here, I'm going to rotate pressing R, right? This is the root joint, and let's say if I want to have a smooth rotation of all the joints of particular chain, you grab the end chain. I repeat, you grab the end chain, you hold shift, you select that one, and that one. Press E as in Edward, and then you can rotate all of them together like that. Another student asked this before, and so I'm gonna show it again, as well as making a video tutorial. Then I'm gonna go in here, press 0. That was good. Same thing with this. I like to press Q as in Q-tip to hide the gizmo, then shift select, and then turn the gizmo back on, pressing E for rotate. And let's say if you want to test, if you want to have potential stretchy properties, right, for especially the limbs, end of the limbs, right, you can test it. But the way you test the stretchiness, which requires pulling on it, right, is to just pull on it, look at it quickly, and then undo. Do not go in here and type in 0. I repeat, do not go in here and type in 0. You do that, you're going to just shove it back into the previous joint. You know what, I'll do it right now. That's what's gonna happen. And then you might forget what the actual number was, and then it becomes a real headache. You just undo it. So you make a mental note as to what joints you want to have some stretchiness, because that will require a specific type of constraint. Constraint is where you're gonna basically you're gonna have to have controllers like the ball rig. Those controllers has to be placed specifically along the joints that correspond to it, and then you have to do something called a constraint. And there's different types of constraint. There's rotational only constraints. There are rotational and translate constraints as one, and that's the reason why I'm bringing this up, that you have the option to make it stretchy. I do not recommend having everything rotationally and stretch and pulling ability. Certain joints should only have rotational values. There's a reason why. While others should have both. Like for example, the end legs, the end joints, to mimic squash and stretch. So I can pull this, grab that, pull that down, to have a poor man's example of a squash and stretch ability. See, I just undid it. That's the proper way. Do not go in here. Only for rotational values do you punch in 0. Even this. Uh-oh. See? That is a perfect example. Good. Undo it. That's how you do it. Next, finally, what you want to do after you test it, right? You want to, typically I think it's just safer to just unbind everything and go back into rigging of placing your animation controllers and the parenting of the controllers and the creating constraints for the controllers to the bones. So you need to unbind this afterwards. You grab the mesh, you go up here, skin, unbind. There. And in case, do check option box for it. Make sure that remove joint color is checked on. By default, it should be on, but just in case, make sure that everything looks like this. Now it's unbinded, right? You see, you don't see the skin cluster, but you still see the delta mush. I also recommend deleting history. Get rid of this, which is deleting history is here. And you should know by now, it is also here. That's gone. That's how you reset everything. And then you go back into either having to place maybe additional join, or you could take away joints, you know, and then continue on forward from there. So that's how you safely and properly test the articulation and skinning of your animation, your alphabet and the bones and the mesh and everything. Alright, so that's the end of that tutorial. Bye.